Om Niranjanang Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tang Ramakrishnang Shirasa Namami. Revered Swami Prabhanandaji Maharaj and other revered monks of the Ramakrishna order, respected speakers, teachers, research scholars and delegates from various institutes within West Bengal and outside, my esteemed colleagues and my dear students. I feel deeply honored and at the same time humbled for having been entrusted with the task of presenting before this august assembly the theme of the seminar, Sri Ramakrishna's Ideas and Our Times, organized to celebrate Sri Ramakrishna's 175th birth anniversary. Sri Ramakrishna was a thoroughly spiritual personality, but it is beyond my capacity to approach the spiritual dimensions of his ideas and personality. I would rather seek to focus on those aspects of his ideas which can be engaged on an intellectual and emotional level. On his second meeting with Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta, the compiler of Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, encountered a very peculiar situation. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "Well, do you believe in God with form or without form?" Mahendranath wondered, how can one believe in God without form when one believes in God with form? And if one believes in God without form, how can one believe that God has a form? Can these two contradictory ideas be true at the same time? Can a white liquid like milk be black? However, he replied that he preferred to believe in God without form. Sri Ramakrishna then said, "Very good. It is enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form, that is quite all right, but never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form, but hold fast to your own conviction." Mahendranath found this repeated emphasis on the truthfulness of two seemingly opposing attributes of God quite amazing. He was a product of the Western education system introduced by the British in India, but he never came across such an idea in any book that he had read. It was quite likely to be so, as the Western modernity, founded on the principles of enlightenment, taught him a worldview of hierarchically structured binary oppositions, which insisted on viewing things in absolute or either-or terms. From this worldview, one has to choose either science or religion, either reason or faith, either matter or consciousness, either modernity or tradition. There is no middle path. It was from this worldview that the chief architect of Western education system in India, Thomas Babington Macaulay, proudly proclaimed the supremacy of Western wisdom in 1835. And in the same line, John Stuart Mill, one of the champions of Western liberalism, justified the colonial rule of the British over the backward societies in 1861. Sri Ramakrishna has never been defensive of or apologetic about his values. On the one hand, he refused to accept the dictates of a lifeless ritualistic Hindu religion, and on the other hand, he never bowed before the hegemonic designs of Western modernism. He never shouted out his protests against anybody, but through his daily living and deeds, through his face-to-face interaction with people around him, he laid down the foundations of his lofty ideas. During his rigorous spiritual practices or sadhanas for 12 long years, Sri Ramakrishna realized that the ultimate reality was one and it was omnipresent. That is why he could equate service to living beings with the worship of God, Shiva Gyane Jeev Sheva. His realization was based on the scientific methods of observation, comparison, and verification. And he proclaimed that knowing the ultimate reality was the goal of life, Ishwar Labhi Manushya Jiboner Uddesho. At the same time, he stated that the supreme consciousness manifested itself in infinite forms and could be realized through innumerable means. Accordingly, he said, "Joto mat, toto path," as many faiths, so many ways. So the method Sri Ramakrishna adopted for his experiments with truth were scientific, although the answers that he came across in the end were spiritual in nature. Here, he becomes a great synthesizer. We believe Sri Ramakrishna's approach towards the concept of God and religion can be emulated in other fields of life as well. And Sri Ramakrishna himself did so. At the time of his Upanayan, or sacred thread ceremony, he refused to obey the social custom and accepted his first alms from a lower caste woman, Dhoni Kamarini. During his Islam sadhana, he got himself initiated by a Sufi priest, Govinda Rai. He rebuked his conservative devotees like Captain Vishwanath Upadhyay for pressing him not to mix with an outcast or mleccha like Keshav Chandra Sen. So Sri Ramakrishna's insistence on seeing God in all was not merely a pious concept, it was rather a way of life for him. He never compromised with his principles. He never had bhaber ghare churi, or as Swami Bhuteshanandji Maharaj put it, theft in the world of being or bhava. Thus he was not merely a teacher, but an acharya whose life exemplified his ideas. Sri Ramakrishna's style of communication was also unique. He never gave a lecture from the podium, but engaged himself in intense dialogue with everyone who came to see him. These dialogues were spontaneous, open-ended, full of metaphors, humor, and songs, and more importantly, characterized by a keen observation on human behavior. He presented his ideas in such a fashion that they were not only attractive to the spiritual seekers, but also to someone who was even a non-believer. There were many down-to-earth solutions to some of the most critical problems of practical life. Say, for instance, the story of the snake, which was advised by its master not to bite, but to show angry posture if necessary. Or the story of a guru advising his disciple to listen to the words of the Mahut Narayan while facing a raging elephant. Or even the depiction of the hypocritical gold merchants who used to utter the names of God while robbing their innocent customers. Through the deliberations of his private as well as public life, Sri Ramakrishna denounced all forms of power structures and relations gently but firmly. Sri Ramakrishna took the formal vows of the monastic life from Totapuri, but he continued to take care of his mother and wife just like a faithful son or husband. He never uttered a harsh word to his wife Sarada Devi, and not only that, he even worshipped her. It was not an act of marginalization through deification. Rather, it was an act of empowering through acceptance. That was why Sri Ramakrishna entrusted Sarada Devi with the task of spiritual guidance to mankind in his absence. In his public interactions, there was no sign of domination or imposition, or even any visible attempt to arrive at any definite conclusion. Yet, whoever joined in those discourses found himself molded in the charm of Sri Ramakrishna's loving personality. His genuine humility, respect for others' viewpoint, and childlike simplicity attracted everyone. These were the qualities that the people of Calcutta of late 19th century needed most to combat their inner contradictions. In the 21st century, perhaps we need them even more. The most striking change we may experience in our daily lives today from the times of Sri Ramakrishna is that of rapidly shrinking time and space. Sri Ramakrishna had to travel for 2 long days to come to Dakshineshwar from his native place, Kamarpukur. It was only a distance of about 100 kilometers. On the contrary, today in 2 days, one can travel around the globe in commercial flights. He had to travel in a horse-driven cart all through the length and breadth of the city of Calcutta to communicate his ideas to his admirers, devotees, and followers. There was no motorized car, nor any electronic communication system. Now we have the internet, the mobile, to connect with the world and share our ideas and emotions. Indeed, the world is becoming a smaller place thanks to the scientific and technological revolutions that have taken place in the last few decades. Not only this, these revolutions have produced a huge amount of goods and services for our consumptions and enjoyment. Spectacular innovations in the field of medical sciences have raised our life expectancy. Thus, we now live longer and consume more, provided we can afford it. As a consequence of our physical proximity to and increased connectivity with other countries and cultures, we are now bound to live in a more heterogeneous society with ever more divergent worldviews. So, the world we live in seems to be more complicated than ever. The demand for a pluralist perspective has never been felt so urgently in every sphere of daily lives. But unfortunately, instead of adapting ourselves with multiple identities, we are inclining towards rigid homogeneities. Instead of having a genuine pluralist worldview, we are finding refuge in dogmatic ones. Instead of restraining our consumption for the sustenance of our posterity, we are destroying our environs. Instead of creating a prosperous world for all, we are attempting in vain to gratify our narrow self-interest. Actually, we have shrunken our own ideas of self, leading to a rapid proliferation of arrogance, intolerance, hatred, and violence in our private as well as public spheres. This is the irony of our existence. And here we may learn a lot from Sri Ramakrishna's ideas. Sri Ramakrishna saw that the real cause of our bondage did not lie in conditions external to us. They had their origins in our minds. So until and unless we are able to cross the limits of our own narrow self, we can never enjoy real freedom. For him, real sadhana consisted not merely in renouncing sense objects, but in giving up the narrow self or ahamkar itself. It was not an act of self-denial, but rather a leap beyond the limitations of the immature self or kacha ami towards a more mature self or paka ami. It was a state of mind attaining which one becomes fearless, ceases to discriminate among beings, and is able to associate himself with the joy and pain of everyone. In this state of mind, one regards nobody as a stranger and remains engaged in doing good to all. Sarva bhuta hite rata. In this age of commercial and technological globalization, this is the kind of consciousness that we need to inculcate. This is a kind of consciousness which on the one hand liberates the individual self and at the same time ensures the welfare of the world. As Swami Vivekananda put it in a unique way, Atmana mokshartham jagat hitaya cha. And Sri Ramakrishna's personality was an embodiment of such an ideal state of consciousness. We believe these aspects of Sri Ramakrishna's ideas and personality have the power to stir our thoughts even today and inspire us to face the challenges of our own times more effectively. To explore, analyze, and appreciate these dimensions of Sri Ramakrishna's ideas, we have identified 6 key areas to focus on during this seminar. They are Sri Ramakrishna and his times, the life of Sri Ramakrishna, the man and his personality, Sri Ramakrishna's ideas, Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita as a text, and Sri Ramakrishna and our times. We hope that this 3-day seminar will give us an opportunity to come closer to Sri Ramakrishna's ideas and personality and enrich our lives.